For my YouTube audience, welcome aboard. Catching this on here, we're going to cover Short Fat Otaku's The New Countercultures, which tries to paint, much like Paul Joseph Watson, the conservative movement is now the counterculture compared to like liberalism or lefty politics. So we'll jump through here, and there's going to be a lot of ahistorical stuff. Just bear in mind with that.
I'm feeling
Make sure everything. Nope, nobody can hear me. Right? Hit my mic. Right? My headphone. Captured, right? So, turn it. Let's turn some stuff up. Back and edit that out.
like a broken record at this point. The last, 5 videos of mine, I've had to do some kind of old man impression. Back in my day, politics was like this. But I really do feel the need to bring up some stuff that's happened before, because it's almost like people have just forgotten about it. Okay, so at this point, you must have heard the song Scott Pilgrim vs. the World Ruined a Whole Generation of Women, right? By Negative XP?
So I've only heard this one through here, and it's going to be, from what I can tell from this Negative XP, he's very much, either he's a big troll, or he's a very deep into like the red pill philosophy and stuff here. Let's
An ecstasy conceited with no self-esteem. She's a teenage dream if you hate yourself. Bright-dyed hair and obnoxious clothes, thinks communism is the way to go. She's a whore, a dime a dozen, Jezebel.
He really managed to nail down that.
Oh, it's it's kind of one of those songs. Not very clever, not backed up in anything, but I mean it is all a little bit of punk rock.
That generic 90s punk sound. A genre of music I'm really not that interested in. But nonetheless, he's got enough
But you're gonna go try to tell us the history of punk music right here, which is gonna be the funny part.
talent to pull it off. The quality of the music isn't what everyone's talking about, though. It's the lyrics.
Right mind and SSR lines, 1,000 yards there for all those guys that you fucked and sucked before you came along. Retarded views on politics, likes to listen to shitty music. She drinks and smokes and toasts out of a dirty bong.
Don't go throwing stones about the shitty music, dude. But this song's wildly popular. Way more popular than anything else Negative XP has done. And it is because the lyrics are describing a certain type of person that would normally be very interested in this sound. Either the type of woman who would listen to this and really enjoy it, if the lyrics were different, of course. Or alternatively, the type of man who listened to this kind of stuff in high school, grew out of it, and is now having a problem finding an actual girlfriend to settle down with. Because at least some of the girls his age are accurately described by this song. The actual guy himself, I'm not sure if he's just a...
Like I said, I don't know if this is a troll or if that's his actual belief big in the incel red pill stuff. Certainly would make sense with his shitty political observations in the song.
memester, or if he actually is an MRA, but to be honest, it doesn't really matter. Either way, the establishment right now is kind of angry at him for this song. But wait.
What establishment? I hadn't even heard this song before, and looking at it, it's only at least now that it's up a few 100,000 views. Maybe it had more before that. Maybe it was taken down for a while, and that's why Short Fat Otaku's talking about it now. But yeah, it's not super huge that everybody knows about it and that some establishment is after it. So I don't know what he's talking about.
What is the establishment, anyway? So we're just defending an incel and a sexist because ma punk culture. You do realize this guy's a serious incel. You cannot claim to be a part of a culture or subculture if you have no idea what its roots and values are. Wearing all black does not make you goth. Liking the 70s and drugs does not make you a hippie. You cannot be a conservative punk. Culture is more than appearance and interests.
So, yeah, this is wrong. You know, I know a lot of punk fans like to think it'll only be this left-wing thing, but it ignores the very history of it. Now, part of that is because some of the biggest bands in the punk movement came out very left and kind of anti here against some of the stuff that came in here. But like the oi genre in the first wave of punk was pretty much, you know, overtaken by neo-Nazi skinheads and stuff like that. Part of it comes through it, and this might be a big teaching lesson to a lot of the ironic Nazis and stuff on here that I don't think they're doing it just for a meme of how it quickly gets overtaken by actual Nazis, neo-Nazis and the like. But yeah, a lot of the Nazi references and everything else that in some of the very early punk bands, Bones have a bunch of Blitzkrieg Bop and stuff like that have references there, or what's the song? Today My Love, Tomorrow the World, I think is the title of the song. Literally sung from the point of view of a Nazi, a love interest, and now it's humorous and tongue-in-cheek, and then the version that we actually got was censored a bit. They changed a couple of words around out of there from where it was a lot edgier and stuff that way, but that kind of stuff brought in those skinheads. So we'll get to getting more of that here and more of the other stuff here, but yeah, saying that you can't be right-wing and a punk is just wrong. I mean, that goes back very, very early too.
Punk cannot literally be right-wing. Shut the fuck up, Lamau. The whole point is that it's not. Really? Is that the point? I didn't know that the punk subculture had a particular political slant. The punk subculture includes a diverse array of ideologies, fashion, and other forms of expression, visual art, dance, literature, and film. It is largely characterized by anti-establishment views, the promotion of individual freedom, do-it-yourself ethics, and is centered on a loud, aggressive genre of rock music called punk rock. Punk politics cover the entire political spectrum. The punk ethos is primarily made up of beliefs such as nonconformity, anti-authoritarianism, anti-corporatism, a do-it-yourself ethic, anti-consumerism, anti-corporate greed, direct action, and not selling out. There's a wide array of punk fashion, including deliberately offensive t-shirts, leather jackets, Dr. Martens boots, hairstyles such as brightly colored hair and spiked mohawks, cosmetics, tattoos, jewelry, and body modification. Women in the hardcore scene typically wear masculine clothing. This definitely sounds like it can describe the left. The anti-corporatism, the direct action, the not...
Oh, and a lot of this... He's going to get into the straw man of the left that we all know and laugh about that the chuds bring up in this stuff here. But yeah, this, it's a Wikipedia page, obviously covers it very well. Now, generally speaking, punk and subculture tends to be left-wing. Tend to be left-wingers in here. And a lot of this stuff that's wrapped around this is very much image-driven, right? That it's just as much of a gimmick, at least for the punk bands and some of the punk people in it, as like Kiss and their makeup, right? Things like that. Or you get into some of the metal bands with like Gwar with the garish costumes and stuff like that. So a lot of this stuff that put out here that like a lot of the fans punk music like is a gag. It's not. It's just an image that they want to project.
Not selling out, as well as the fashion style, are all enjoyed by people on the radical left right now. But this also describes the right, the anti-authoritarianism and the do-it-yourself ethic, both things that are championed right now by the right.
No, it's not. I mean, the mainstream right in this country is in love with Trump. Well, maybe not the leaders, but like the general populace that supports it loves Trump, who's very authoritarian in what he's doing, how he's violating laws and land, constitution, things like that. Should be removed from office from it. But yeah, this doesn't describe the right. Maybe you can get it into some of the libertarian hardcore and caps, maybe into some of that stuff, but you find more often than not that those libertarian and caps are more than willing to fall behind authoritarian things when things don't go their way. There's a pretty big pipeline from the that circle to like the alt-right, which certainly is none of these things that he wants to try to paint as a subculture.
As I described in the video 2 days ago, Why is Preparation Problematic?, are actively rejected by the radical left right now. They want the centralized authority to implement socialism, and they want people dependent on that socialism, which means the do-it-yourself ethic is out.
Yeah, that's none of those things go together, and that isn't true about like the socialists. This is the kind of the shitty idea, make me defend a socialist as a liberal here, but no, government programs, welfare state, all that other stuff is not socialism, right? It's not even inherently against like the right wing, or even especially like the neoliberals in the right wing and stuff, that you can have some of these government programs to help, as Friedman would say, the losers in the lottery of life kind of thing, right? That you can have some programs, some monetary aid and all that other stuff here that he's going to call socialism. That's kind of the shittiness of his analysis.
It's my layman's understanding that the actual core of what punk is the anti-authoritarianism. It's being a part of the counterculture. In fact, it's being explicitly offensive towards the mainstream. They're satirists, they're iconoclasts. They say and do things that the Karens of the world clutch their pearls at, and they say and do them specifically to cause that reaction. But
that is some of the punks, that is some of the punk movement. Not all of them. And like I said earlier, going down that route led to a lot of Nazis coming in, to where you needed the dead Kennedys, Jello Biafra, to write fuck off Nazi punks, right?
As expected, there are a lot of social justice punks, basically just feminist women who like the fashion, who are, unsurprisingly, shitting all over Negative XP for his song.
So that's not true. Like, a lot of the punks were socialists, right? And they're like the only big like mainstream recognized one, if you don't get into some of the niche neo-Nazi punks and stuff, that was a quote-unquote conservative in any way, would have been Johnny Ramone. But you would never have known that while he's playing it. It only became apparent in their acceptance speech into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. He said, God bless George Bush, God bless America, right? And it came here that he was a pretty boomer conservative. And even like in some of the music stuff, wasn't, especially if you go like the Ramones and stuff, weren't really all that, say, edgy or out there or anything like that. I mean, some of the stuff they brought, like the buzzsaw guitar and stuff, but for a lot of them, they wanted to recapture the glory of rock and roll, the 60s rock and roll garage bands, stuff like that, the Beatles, before the progressive rock, 70s and the arena stuff became a thing. So that's what they were looking for, at least in the music sound.
Some of you may recognize the song Scott Pilgrim vs. the World ruined an entire generation of women based off of some popular TikToks. Well, I'm here to show my counterpoint to that song called The Song Scott Pilgrim vs. the World ruined an entire generation of women, ruined an entire generation of men that frankly had no chance to be saved to begin with. Here we go. Skater.
And I'm right here, that's a very cringe, because we're talking about a song that came out recently, about 6 months ago, right? So it's hard to say it ruined an entire generation of men. And it's not just a play on some of the toxic elements of like the MRA movement, or the incels, the red pill community, and it just kind of spun out of there. It's that, it's a reflection of some of the stuff here. So this is cringe. Oh yeah, we'll go through.
TKYLE, he dabbles in misogyny, and he's trying to have a threesome with you. His partner is non-binary and still refers to them as she, and forbids them to see any other dudes. Has no good handle on consent. His parents are the 1%. His mom pays rent but says that he's oppressed.
I mean, this is a very, you know, shallow understanding of punk and stuff. Like, um, a lot of the like if you go listen to a lot of the Clash stuff, they're offended by the stuff that goes on in the world in there, and that's what they're singing about, like all those shitty things. A lot of the punk is being offended, right? Even if you go to some of the punk, like the Ramones, who weren't super political in their music, right? They were offended by the popular music at the time and what they felt was a loss of rock and roll, right? At the core of it. So it's, you know, this is really shallow, doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about with punk on here. But I mean, and he's also one of the guys that would be offended by the SJW takeover of things as well, which is just ridiculous.
Won't date a trans girl even though he IDs as bisexual. Refuses to go see a therapist.
I guess punk is about embracing the establishment politics and sanitizing language now, guys. I guess it's all about falling in line with the corporate-sponsored climate protests, or ratting out rule breakers who are going outside for non-essentials right now, or demanding government handouts. What happened to the do-it-yourself ethic? They're no longer.
So that's none of, like I said, doesn't understand the do-it-yourself ethic, right? The do-it-yourself ethic is, hey, we're gonna pick up the guitar and we're gonna play it, you know, that way we're gonna, you know, can barely play it here, but we'll find 3 chords that we can play together and we can play, you know, punk songs, loud, brash, angry in a lot of cases, right? That just leaves out some, like, even more like the old school pop punk, like the Buzzcocks, which is straight up, you know, love songs and things like that, right? So it's really shallow understanding of what punk is.
Longer the counterculture, they're part of the establishment now. They still desperately want to cling to that rebellious feel, that they're somehow the freedom fighters going up against the entire world. But who actually believes it? All of their musical stars are past middle age taking corporate sponsorships. Their fashion is mainstream. Their subculture is now popular and profitable. Like Scott.
Well, I mean, not very much anymore. Punk rock is kind of seen its heyday. You know, maybe you get 1 or 2 bands that still, like, Green Day doesn't even sell a whole bunch of records anymore, and they're some of the most popular stuff. Like, their heyday is early 2000s, mid 90s, early 2000s for at least that pop punk thing. You have the late 70s before it turned into new wave, right? Early 80s, post punk and stuff like that. So yeah, it's not like popular mainstream anymore, kind of thing, right? I know a few punk bands that get some buzz that are punk, but you know, they don't seem like anything like the punk that was popular before.
Pilgrim has shown us. I saw a fascist who is still thinking about this and how punk is anti-establishment, so we can continue to be Trumpian and listen to punk. Oh really? And how anti-establishment are you? Considering that virtue signaling is the establishment now, and you've got that rainbow flag.
I mean, you're virtue signaling right now, short fat Otaku. That's kind of the embarrassment or the destruction of a term like virtue signaling that at one point meant something, and now it's basically things I disagree with. Therefore, you're virtue signaling. It's taking over here, but oh boy. I mean, like I said, these takes that punk cannot be right wing are dumb. It's been right wing. There have been right wing punk movies. They're not the most popular punk movements. Well remembered, right? Because those tend to be left wing punk bands, right? But they exist, and it's been a culture that's existed forever. Punk movement.
Flag emoji in your name. You've got those pronouns in your bio. And yes, virtue signaling is the mainstream culture right now. I don't give a fuck if you're cisgender, put your damn pronouns in your bio. Hey, just want to urge cis oomps to put your pronouns in your bio. Let's help create a safe space for the transgender community. A good way to subtly signal to trans people that you're with them is to put your pronouns in your bio. We would like this to become standard practice because it makes more sense. Putting pronouns in your bio for cis people helps normalize and protect trans individuals. If this is the
So I don't know how you get that establishment or mainstream. That's not a very common thing to do, right? To have that kind of attitude, and there's a lot of anti-trans movement in what you would quote unquote establishment or mainstream America and stuff. Right? This is like I these people exist, and these are culture critics or whatever of the world now for a lot of people. That's I don't get it. It's dumb.
Mainstream right now, then the offensive counterculture would be to parody this. But
I mean, so even taking like what do you say, virtue signaling, right? So we'll go to like very early punk, with the Clash, whatever. They had a song called White Riot, and because of how Joe Strummer sang and stuff like that on the album, it's hard to make out anything else there other than the chorus that White Riot, I want to riot, White Riot, ride on my own. I think is the whole chorus. Back to, but that's generally what it is. But that's about the only part of the song you can make out. And so what happened with that is a lot of neo-Nazis, skinheads, and things like that took it to mean race riots against people of color, and that wasn't it. And so to fight back against that, for that view of that song, the Clash played at an anti-racism concert, like a concert benefit strictly anti-racism. So if we had the internet, YouTube stuff back then, people like Short Fat Otaku would talk about how the Clash were virtue signaling and all this other stuff, right? So this, like, again, this is the shitty shallowness of it here. Or, when I brought up Nazi Punk's "Fuck Off" by the Dead Kennedys. When that song came out, people like Short Fat Otaku at the time, even though punk was a subculture. Yeah, I can't help my accent there, but yeah, how you doing, Max John? But yeah, but in there they'd say it's virtue signaling, right? There'd be the same complaints about it here, right? And it's really dumb, it's really shallow, and it's not here. But he's gonna make the claim that the alt-right is the new counterculture because they value free speech, and it's like, what fucking world does he live in?
Sarcastically using Z and Zer, or mentioning identifying as an attack helicopter or something. That's not considered punk, even though it actually fits with the original spirit of punk. That's considered fascist or whatever. Alright, forget the stupid Twitter junk for a minute.
I mean, the attack helicopter joke is not punk in any other way, and even in the shallowest sense that you think it, right? It's a boomer tier meme at this point. It'd be something to be abandoned in your shallow view of what punk is. Me, I'm from the Midwest in the U.S.
The punk subculture is still about being shocking. It's still about being provocative. It's still about causing moral panics. The only difference is, it's now the punks themselves that are the targets of it. Again, at the risk of sounding like an old man, the left of today has failed to realize that we've advanced into a new political era. The Republicans were once the party of George Bush and the neocons. They were all about globalist corporatism, eternal war in the Middle East, generally over oil, and codifying Christian fundamentalism into American law. During that era...
Alright, so what's changed about the Republicans now, or the conservatives, right? It's still the same with the alt-right, like, except now they want to, they're white ethno-state at this point.
Era, the 90s and the 2000s, it was very easy for the left to hold the moral high ground against that kind of an opponent. And most people who are relatively apolitical, but lazily identify as center-left, do so because of that era. Left became the dominant political affiliation for your average Joe. Because
No, it didn't. Like, this is somebody who's completely politically illiterate, does not understand anything about any goddamn thing with any of this stuff, trying to pass off these half-baked theories and analysis on it here. Like, liberal was always a dirty term. Like, the liberal media, that the big thing that's used right here, and say, oh, the mainstream liberal media and all this other stuff that they want to put up here, that's been a thing forever, like literally since Fox News was a thing, became a thing. That's been a talking point on the right. Right? That's not some new thing there that takes over. It's like, oh, it's great to be liberal and all this other stuff. It's, ugh.
The right was just constantly dropping the ball. But there was a paradigm shift in 2012. Again, go back to that Rachel Maddow clip that I posted like a week or so ago. The Republicans...
I mean, what paradigm shift? There wasn't a paradigm shift, like, at all. Now, there's been more criticism of the neocons, but I mean, the neocons aren't really gone, right? Like, there's still in the Republican Party plenty of them beating their chests for war, right? May have some of the more libertarian leaning Republicans, like a Rand Paul, who are at least speaking. What do I want to say? Not a show, not speaking to like the anti-interventionism stuff, but he's still, supports, especially when he ran in 2016. One of his big things to fight back against the kind of the pacifist look that he was going to be attacked with in the Republican primaries, he turned around and authored, a big military spending increase, right? Just out of the blue, pushed to get that through, so he'd have that on his record. So it's like, he didn't really care about that non-interventionism that he seems to think through, and that's probably your standard bearer outside of him and his dad. His dad's a little more principled, and that's why, back in 2008 when I was still on the right, I liked his dad. Right?
Got destroyed in those elections. And when they came back, they were not George Bush's Republicans. The remnants of that Republican Party are still embodied in like the Mitt Romney Never Trumpers, who are basically losers at this point. They have no political capital anymore. But the left still pretends like it has the moral high ground, like it's fighting the right wing of old, like they are somehow still the counterculture.
I mean, it's still, if you want to argue, has the high ground, right? I mean, that hasn't changed, right? We're talking about a moral position, right?
Still the subversive element taking on the evil empire. But that's just not how it is anymore.
I mean, for like the leftists and the socialists that were punishing stuff, yeah, they would still say they are. Socialism isn't a big thing here. Now, you think socialism is things like universal health care, which it isn't, right? And all these other government programs, but that's kind of the political illiteracy of people like Short Fat Otaku.
The radical left is not the rebellion. And this whole punk thing with this, frankly, kind of dumb Negative XP song perfectly encapsulates this wider issue. These people have been so used to thinking that they are the counterculture, that now that they're not, now that they've actually seized cultural power, now that their ideology can be found everywhere in our society.
Where, right, like before the 2018 midterms, the Republicans controlled all three branches of government, right? Where is this power all over society? It's just not there. Right? And this is, like I said, the political illiteracy of people like Short Fat Otaku.
They have no idea what to do. So they just carry on acting like they're somehow still the underdog. And as a result, they keep losing to the actual underdog. I mean, really, do you think people like Greta Thunberg, or even Anita Sarkeesian, to bring back an old name, do you really think they're the grassroots counterculture, speaking at the UN? Or do you think the counterculture is maybe all the YouTubers listed in the Alternative Action Report? I mean, as flawed as that...
The hell's the Alternative Action Report? Hold on. Am I gonna look really bad looking this up? Let's pull this up. Is it the Political Action Report? Oh, that's not what I want. Say that was. Let's go back. We're almost done here. Let's go back and...
Do you think people like Greta Thunberg, or even Anita Sarkeesian, to bring back an old name, do you really think they're the grassroots counterculture, speaking at the UN? Or do you think the counterculture is maybe all the YouTubers listed in the Alternative Action Report? I mean, as flawed...
Alternative Action Report. Let's look that up. I was not even right. Shows how well I listened. This here, the action report, is that what it is? What I got for video. This can't be the right channel. I don't know what he's talking about. That cannot be the right channel. But we'll go back and finish up this video here. I'll look through it here. If I can find it, I'll make something up. Whoa, what's going off? No, don't. Just one up. But as on hey Tara, how you doing? But on to, like, Greta Thunberg and stuff like that. Yeah, I mean, climate change here around the world is, especially here in the U.S., is really bad. Especially under Trump and the like. You know, it's still not taken as seriously as it should be, right? So, yeah, they would be the still counterculture.
What as that thing was, the whole point.
Yeah. I'm doing good. Yeah, there's give or take on Greta, but I mean, all she is speaking out on a very important issue that we got to solve.
Point of it was to describe how these deplorables, these subversives, these people who had absolutely no mainstream support.
I mean, they're not subversive, right? Short fat attack, right? They want traditional families, traditional, all this other stuff that just basically stock conservatism, stock, Republican family values. That stuff hasn't changed, right? Now, maybe they're a little less interventionist than the neocons, right? But I mean, they're still right in line with all the stock Republican talking points, conservatism, stuff like that.
Had crafted their own community outside the walls, beyond the bounds of what the mainstream considers acceptable. Now, they labeled it as an alt-right pipeline, which is completely ludicrous, but it is a structure that isn't mainstream.
I mean, the alt-right pipeline is a thing, right? And a lot of it is based more on the recommendation algorithm, stuff like that on these social media platforms that push you down there. So if you watch, your typical, like, anti-SJW chud or whatever, who's, maybe someone like, say, TJ, who's on the left of center and stuff, doing an anti-SJW video, eventually you get pushed down to people that are more extreme or things like that. So you might run into, now Devin Trace is a little weird, like he's a very racist Democrat kind of thing there too, but you get pushed from like TJ the Amazing Atheist to Devin Tracy, Atheism is Unstoppable, and then you'll get like the 1350 arguments and stuff there. Well, then from the 1350 arguments, you'll get 50 arguments, you'll get things in recommendation that are, like Stefan Molyneux and other things that are race realists. And then before you know it, you get down to like the Richard Spencers of the world, right? It is a thing. It is a known thing, right? Like even people at the end, like in the alt-right, at the end of that pipeline, still talk about, like, Richard Spencer bragged about how like Sargon was the entry point, right? And stand behind him and try to promote and all this other stuff because it'll bring him to him. Yeah, like TJ is a very entertaining content creator, and I'm glad he's kind of left a lot of the anti-SJW stuff behind so that I can focus on like the entertaining stuff. Like, I love Deep Fat Fried. It is great. Everything about it is what made Drunken Peasants, back in the day, enjoyable. Without a lot of the politics stuff, in terms of like the anti-SJW stuff. That's changed and got better there, but yeah. Pipeline's a thing, it's an accepted thing, right? It's well known at this point. So this is just short fat otaku denying reality.
It is the new counterculture. I think this is why Negative XP's song received, and continues to receive despite being over 8 months old, this ridiculous backlash. Because it's using, for the first time in probably a decade, the sound of punk to do what punk was originally meant to do. Offend the sensibilities of the mainstream. And because things...
So that's not what punk was meant to do originally. Punk, in its original form, was something wild and fun kind of thing under there. Like, the Ramones, like Blitzkrieg Bob, like one of the greatest punk anthems. They'll tell you point blank, they wanted to do a song like the oh my god, why am I drawing a blank on what was the boy band at the time that did Saturday? It was oh, why am I screwing this up? Oh, let me, God, it's something boys. I cannot remember. Let's pull it up quick. They Um, what is it? It's something. It's not. Why am I having such a? Let's see if this will bring it up. Why am I drawing a blank on the band that was? Pull it up here. Like a bubblegum pop. Um, uh, whatever. Some '70s boy band that was big at the time, but it was like a chant song, so they wanted to make that, and um, that's what it was. And a lot of like the punk music and stuff was bands of like '60s garage or like the Ramones '60s girl groups, stuff like that. And that's what they wanted. Right now, some of the imagery around it, right? Some of the punk imagery that evolved out of that certainly came here. But if you look at like the role Malcolm McLaren played in the punk movement, right now it's disputed by members of like the Sex Pistols, but Malcolm McLaren ran a punk boutique, right? That basically the style of punk, and he was manager of the Sex Pistols early on, helped put them together, and so depends on who you read and who you talk to, but it seems like he had a very big hand in it. And before he did Sex Pistols, because part of the punk look came from what's his name? Richard Hell. Yeah, Richard Hell. Television, then the Heartbreakers, and ultimately when he finally put something else, it was Richard Hell and the Voidoids, whatever it was his band. That was the look he took there. He got that idea when he managed the New York Dolls at the end, and so when he managed the New York Dolls, the whole let's piss people off, they did a big communist thing, right? As kind of that image to kind of grab PR, because there's no such thing as bad PR, and so much of the acting and stuff that you see in Johnny Rotten, how he portrayed himself and how he behaved on TV, that was an act. Right? That's not real. That's not really who Johnny Rotten was.
Have swung so far to the left that the counterculture now is, paradoxically, the adoption of traditional values, at least in some areas. Then it makes complete sense that Negative XP's song would be a critique of current sexual morality.
I mean, no, the traditional family stuff is not counterculture, right? It's still very much the mainstream. Alright, so that does it with that one.